Oklahoma Bridges here, and welcome to part 7 of the Westclox Big Ben rebuild. And in the last video, which was part 6, I installed the balance wheel assembly and set the beat. And before we get too much further along with reassembly of the movement, I'd like to take this opportunity to reinstall some of the other parts that are easily installable at this point while the movement is still pretty wide open, because we still have these large open areas of accessibility here because the time and alarm barrel bridges are out of the movement. So I thought what we would do first would be to install the alarm trip parts, and for that we're going to need first the alarm trip spring and one of the screws that holds it on, and it's one of the screws. These are little button head stove bolt head screws. They're identical to the 6 screws that hold the bridges on. And the first thing to do is to identify the hole in the movement plate where the trip staff goes, and that would be obviously right here. And so if we draw sort of a line straight across at right angles to the up and down axis of the movement, we'd see that that's going to be where this attaches. So we need to go ahead and do that. Mount the alarm trip spring. And thank God these little screwdriver here has been magnetized. I'm frequently magnetizing and then unmagnetizing screwdrivers because I'll be working on clocks, and I'll be working on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and then I'll be working on a clock again. And I don't ever use a bulk tape demagnetizer to do the screwdrivers. I usually use a head demagnetizer. Although, in all honesty, you could use the armature of an electric clock or other similar electric motor to do the demagnetizing. Now, it's important to make sure that that hole is centered there, and even though I got that screw fairly tight, you can still move it around. Just be sure to make sure that that's snug, and make sure with everything off that the alarm hammer there is free to move back and forth with the spring out. And now here's going to be one of the fun parts, and that's installing the parts for the alarm trip. Now the next thing that goes on is going to be a washer, and I happen to have that washer right here. You'll remember me discussing it during the disassembly procedure. We're going to go ahead and line up all the washers. This is the washer that's going to go on the inside side of the movement plate. That's the leaf spring washer that provides the alarm set tension. There's 2 of these washers. This one goes between the leaf spring washer and the threaded collar that is used to set the tensions. We're going to install this part first. And some people like to put a little dab of oil on there and to stick it on. What I prefer to do is just the quality of the machining on these Westclox parts is amazing. You'll see there's quite a bit of machining that's gone on there. We've got a shaft that has 2 flats machined on it. Then there's a threaded section. Then there's what I like to call a pilot section on the end that is the minor diameter of the flatted area. Okay? And of course the movement's going to want to fall over on me when I'm trying to push that in. But we're going to stick that washer on the collar and then rotate the shaft where the flats line up with the double D hole in that washer, and then push that all the way back. Now you'll notice that I've left a part out, so we're going to have to take this out and start over again, because there's an important part that has to go in there. And you see that that wants to catch on the threads on the threaded part of the shaft. That's fine, it dropped out where we can find it still. We have to put this part on. This has got the alarm trip cam and the alarm wheel that rotates once every 12 hours. And make sure that that's all nice and free on there. And then now we can put that on. Same procedure. Large washer with the double D-shaped hole. Get it started on the pilot end of the shaft. Rotate the arbor to where it gets onto the threaded part with the flats, and then push it all the way like that. Okay, now there's going to be some spring tension there, so you really can't push it all the way, but that's fine. Just hold it there, because now we're going to tip the movement back, and there are some holes in the back plate of the movement to receive the ends of the leaf spring that forms the tension. And then if you look at these washers, you'll see one of these washers was the one that rubs against that spring, because the edge will be sort of burnished. And go ahead and put that washer back on with the edge facing the way it would have gone. And then the threaded collar. And one side of the threaded collar, the hole isn't chamfered. The other side of the threaded collar, the hole is chamfered. The chamfered side of the hole goes towards the leaf spring. Okay. And make sure that it starts on the threads okay and doesn't cross thread. Very important not to cross thread your threaded collar. Now we can snug the threaded collar up just a little bit. Okay, now since I don't have the shuck pinion back on, we can do a little bit of testing here. So this is the minute wheel, and it's going to rotate this way. And you see there's a ramp portion right there where after the alarm trips, there's a ramped portion on that trip cam that forces the wheel back down to the non-alarm position. Okay. Our first test to make sure that we have the tension on this arbor sufficient, that is, the tension on this leaf spring is sufficient, is that after the alarm trips, when you rotate this back, this finger should not follow that, okay? That finger should force this wheel down as it follows that inclined ramp. If the tension is too loose, if this tension is too loose, this will want to follow the ramp. All right. I don't really know any hard and set ways of determining what the best tension is. You can temporarily thread the alarm setting knob on there and test it and see what you think. But you definitely want it tight enough that it's not going to follow that ramp, and you don't want it so tight that you can't comfortably set it. Now, these knobs are very large and allow you to put quite a bit of turning effort on there. And I like to err on the side of caution just a little bit, so I'm going to give this another 1/8 of a turn and see how it feels. You don't have to do very much. And I feel that tension is about right. I think probably the best balance, we're going to go ahead and temporarily put the time setter hand on, is if the tension is about what the time set tension is, you've got it correct. Alright, that's a benchmark where you cannot go wrong with. Don't go any tighter than what the center friction is. But don't go drastically loose. Like I said, the important part, and it's easy to test it at this point because the shuck pinion is not on, is that does not follow the ramp. Okay, there the alarm is tripped. And you see it went right up and didn't follow. Okay, so at this point there should be two things happening. And this is where you might want to do some adjusting. Is generally speaking, the alarm spring should be in between the teeth of the escape wheel, and the tail of the spring here, this inclined surface, should be holding the repeat lever up. This is important. You don't want that to be producing drag on the time movement when the alarm is not active. If the, let's go ahead and take this off so I don't forget that washer's not on there. And we'll go ahead and set these parts aside. It'll be later on before we put these on. This is the tension spring for the dust proofing washer. Okay, so what you might want to do is check this, and you might want to bend this in slightly like this so that it pushes the repeat lever up, because you don't want the clock repeating when during the off period when the alarm is not active. Okay, I just gave that a little bend like that. And now I'm going to operate this, and you should see the repeat lever pull up. If it's pulled up far enough that it's not interfering with the alarm verge, then it's definitely a certain fact that it's not riding on the third wheel cam. Okay, that's very important. You do not want that to occur, because this is going to create extra drag as the clock runs that you do not want. So as the clock runs during the evening, you know, and then in the morning, the alarm goes off. Now the repeat mechanism is active, and then do a little check. Let's run this a little bit here until the third wheel rotates far enough the repeat lever drops into a slot. Okay, now we're checking to make sure that the spring is adjusted such that it is not interfering with the repeat mechanism when it is out, because we could bend that in too far where the clock would not repeat during the alarm phase. So that's perhaps the most important adjustment to make on the alarm. And what's interesting to note is, even though this is a style 5 or 5A technically movement, it still has this little tail on the repeat lever for the steady repeat lever that's on the Style 1A and Style 2 Big Bends. And I think the Style 1s are the same as well. So most of the techniques I'm showing you here apply to the older movements as well. Anyway, I'm going to break this video off here, and in part 8, we'll oil the movement. Since we know the escapement runs, I know that there's no reason to possibly disassemble the movement, so we can install the shuck pinion after the clock is oiled, and then reassemble the time and alarm mainspring barrel assemblies. So join me for part 8 in the next video. This is Oklahoma Bridges, and thank you for watching.